On September 28, 2019, Dayne Brajkovich appeared before a Perth court as a protected witness. His testimony targeted central figures of organized crime in Western Australia: drug traffickers, extortionists, hitmen linked to the Rebels Motorcycle Club, one of the most violent biker organizations in the Southern Hemisphere. Brajkovich was no ordinary citizen. He had been for years a high-ranking member of the Coffin Cheaters, a rival club to the Rebels. With decades of history and territorial confrontations, methamphetamine trafficking, and control of bars, casinos, and drug distribution routes across the entire west coast of Australia. What was unusual was not that a former biker was cooperating with justice. What was extraordinary was that he did so openly, without anonymity, defying not only his former rivals, but also the internal codes of his own world. In the universe of outlaw clubs, talking to the police is equivalent to a death sentence. Brajkovich knew it, and yet he decided to testify. His statement triggered an immediate wave of violence. Less than 48 hours after his appearance, his residence in a northern suburb of Perth was attacked with firearms. No one was injured, but the message was clear. Brajkovich had crossed a line from which there was no return. The Australian press covered the case with incendiary headlines. Some called him a traitor, others brave. But no one could deny that his decision had opened a crack in the structure of Australian organized crime. The central question that ran through the halls of the Western Australia Police, the courtrooms, and the newsrooms was simple but disturbing. What had Dayne Brajkovich seen that led him to break with everything? What kind of violence, corruption, or internal betrayal could have pushed him to renounce the protection of silence and expose himself to organized revenge? And above all, how much did he really know about the criminal network operating beneath the surface of a seemingly quiet city like Perth? The context was fundamental. Perth, with its 2 million inhabitants, its idyllic beaches, and its prosperous mining economy, projected the image of a safe, orderly city, almost provincial compared to Sydney or Melbourne. But beneath that facade of normality, a complex and violent criminal ecosystem operated, where motorcycle clubs had built empires based on drug trafficking, extortion, and money laundering. And Brajkovich had been at the center of that world for more than a decade. To understand Brajkovich's decision, it is necessary to go back decades. Outlaw motorcycle clubs in Australia began to proliferate in the 70s, inspired by their American counterparts like the Hells Angels and the Bandidos. But in the Australian context, these clubs were not simply groups of motorcycle enthusiasts. They were, from the beginning, paramilitary structures designed for territorial control and illegal profit. The Coffin Cheaters were founded in 1970 in Perth. Their name, which translates as those who cheat the coffin, reflected a philosophy of life outside the law and a death aesthetic that became their trademark. During the 80s and 90s, the club expanded throughout Western Australia, establishing chapters in mining cities, ports, and rural areas where police control was scarce and opportunities for drug trafficking were abundant. The Rebels, on the other hand, were even larger and more organized. Founded in Brisbane in 1969, they had become the largest outlaw motorcycle club in Australia, with more than 70 chapters across the country and an international presence in New Zealand, Fiji, and Southeast Asia. Their hierarchical structure, Their mobilization capacity and their network of lawyers, accountants, and legitimate businessmen made them something more than a club. They were a criminal corporation. The rivalry between both clubs was not ideological, it was territorial. Both competed for control of the same methamphetamine distribution routes, the same access to ports to import chemical precursors, the same networks of police corruption that allowed them to operate without interference. And in that context, violence was not an option. It was the main negotiation tool. Dayne Brajkovich joined the Coffin cheaters in the mid-2000s. His rise was rapid. He was intelligent, disciplined, and capable of handling both the logistics of drug trafficking and relationships with suppliers and distributors. Within a few years, he occupied leadership positions within the club, which meant not only prestige, but also direct responsibility in high-risk operations. But the world of outlaw clubs in Australia was changing. In the early 2010s, federal authorities began implementing anti-association legislation, known as anti-bikie laws, which allowed the prohibition of meetings, the seizure of properties, and the imposition of more severe penalties for members of clubs identified as criminal organizations. Police pressure increased, and with it, internal paranoia. These laws did not emerge from nowhere. They were the response to an escalation of violence that had shocked the country. In 2009, a massive fight between members of the Hells Angels and the Comancheros at Sydney Airport, broadcast live by security cameras and watched by millions of Australians, left one dead and several injured. The incident demonstrated that outlaw clubs were no longer a marginal problem. They were a threat to public safety. The government response was forceful but controversial. Anti-bikie laws allowed preventive arrests, association bans, and more severe sentences simply for belonging to a club designated as a criminal organization. Human rights organizations argued that these laws violated fundamental freedoms, but the government insisted they were necessary to dismantle sophisticated criminal networks. For Brajkovich and the Coffin cheaters, these laws meant a change in strategy. They could no longer meet openly. They could no longer display their colors in public without risk of arrest. They had to adapt their operations, become more discreet, more professional, and that, paradoxically, made them more dangerous. During the 2010s, the Coffin cheaters underwent a transformation. They went from being a marginal club to becoming a sophisticated organization with international movement capability. Their main source of income was methamphetamine, known in Australia as ice, a drug whose consumption had reached epidemic levels in cities and inland towns. Brajkovich was part of the inner circle that managed imports. The routes were complex: chemical precursors from China, clandestine laboratories in rural areas of Western Australia, distribution through networks of intermediaries that included everyone from taxi drivers to nightclub employees. The volume of operations was massive. It is estimated that between 2015 and 2018, the Coffin cheaters moved more than 200 kilos of methamphetamine in the Perth region alone, with a market value close to 60 million Australian dollars. But the business was not just drugs. The clubs also controlled the private security market in bars and events, extorted local businessmen, and laundered money through apparently legitimate businesses, mechanic shops, motorcycle dealerships, gyms. The facade of legality was essential, and Brajkovich understood that better than anyone. The club operated with a business structure. There were specialists in each area, accountants who handled money laundering, lawyers who defended arrested members, chemists who supervised production in clandestine laboratories, distributors who managed retail sales. Everything was compartmentalized. If one link fell, the rest of the chain kept functioning. Brajkovich supervised transportation logistics. He knew the routes, the schedules, the delivery points. He knew when police conducted highway checks and when it was safe to move merchandise. He had developed a network of contacts that included port employees, truck drivers, and even some customs officers who turned a blind eye in exchange for regular payments. However, the relationship between the Coffin cheaters and the rebels began to deteriorate irreversibly. In 2017, a confrontation in a bar in Joondalup, a northern suburb of Perth, ended with 2 men hospitalized and a wave of cross retaliation. Houses burned, vehicles destroyed, shots fired in the street. The Western Australia Police deployed a special force to contain the violence, but the conflict had already escalated too far. It was in that context that Brajkovich began to see the cracks in the system. Violence was no longer strategic, it was chaotic. Club leaders made impulsive decisions that put at risk not only operations, but also the lives of members and their families. Paranoia about police infiltrators was constant. And worst of all, some high-ranking members were collaborating with the rebels behind the club's back, negotiating territories and betraying internal agreements. Brajkovich had witnessed executions. He had seen men disappear whose only mistake was questioning orders. He had seen how money from drug trafficking did not reach rank-and-file members, but was concentrated in an elite that lived in mansions while the rest assumed the risks. And he had seen, above all, how the police knew more than they pretended to know. Because there were officers on the payroll, there was purchased protection, and there was a system of complicity that allowed everything to keep functioning. The situation worsened when contract killings began. In 2018, a former Coffin Cheaters member who had tried to leave the club was found dead in his vehicle with multiple gunshots to the head. Police cataloged it as a settling of scores, but Brajkovich knew the truth. It had been an execution authorized from the club's leadership to send a message. No one left alive without permission. That was the turning point for Brajkovich. He had entered the club seeking brotherhood, adrenaline, a way of life outside the norms. But what he had found was a machine of death and corruption where loyalty was unilateral and human life was worth nothing. And he, without knowing it, had become part of that machine. The final break came in 2018. Brajkovich was arrested in a coordinated police operation that involved more than 100 agents. He was accused of participating in a methamphetamine trafficking network, possession of unregistered weapons, and membership in a criminal organization. The evidence was overwhelming. Recordings, surveillance, informant testimony. He faced more than 15 years in prison. It was then that he made the decision that would change everything. Instead of assuming the traditional role of the silent biker who serves his sentence without informing on anyone, Brajkovich negotiated an agreement with the prosecution. He agreed to testify against members of the rebels and against key figures in his own club in exchange for a reduced sentence and limited protection. It was not total immunity, it was a gamble. His testimony in 2019 exposed a network of corruption that went beyond the clubs. Brajkovich stated that he had paid bribes to police officers to avoid raids, that he had seen prosecutors receive leaked information before operations, that he knew of money laundering routes involving construction companies with government contracts, and that he knew of at least 3 unsolved murders in which members of both clubs had participated. For 6 consecutive days, Brajkovich testified before the court. He mentioned names, dates, places. He described how trafficking operations worked, how profits were distributed, how decisions about murders and reprisals were made. His testimony was meticulous, detailed, devastating. Defense attorneys tried to discredit him, arguing that he was a criminal seeking to reduce his sentence. But the prosecution presented evidence that corroborated each of his statements. The reaction was immediate and brutal. His house was attacked. His family had to be relocated. He received death threats recorded and sent directly to his phone. But the most disturbing thing was the institutional response. Some sectors of the police treated him as a hero, others as a problem, because his testimony not only pointed to criminals, it also pointed to those who protected them. The resulting trial was an earthquake. Several members of the rebels were sentenced to long prison terms. Some Coffin cheaters were arrested. But the cost to Brajkovich was high. His identity was exposed, his life destroyed, and the system he had tried to dismantle remained standing, adapting, reorganizing. The media pursued him. They wanted exclusive interviews, documentaries, books. Brajkovich refused. He was not seeking fame. He was seeking, according to what he stated in one of his few public appearances, something resembling redemption. He wanted his testimony to serve to protect others, to expose the truth about a system that devoured lives without remorse. But truth in the world of organized crime is a dangerous commodity. And Brajkovich had sold his to the highest bidder, justice. A justice that, however, could not guarantee him permanent security. Today, Dayne Brajkovich lives under relative anonymity. His whereabouts are uncertain. Some reports suggest he was relocated to another region of Australia, possibly under a new identity. Others speculate that he left the country. The Western Australia police neither confirm nor deny anything. His testimony opened dozens of lines of investigation that still continue, but the world he tried to expose keeps functioning. Australian outlaw clubs have learned to operate more discreetly. Anti-bikie laws have not managed to dismantle their structures, only made them more secretive. The rebels remain the largest club in the country. The Coffin cheaters, weakened after the arrests, continue to be active in Western Australia. And methamphetamine trafficking remains a national epidemic, with more than 200,000 regular users in a market that generates billions of dollars annually. The Brajkovich case raises uncomfortable questions about the nature of organized crime in seemingly stable societies. How much real power do these organizations have? How far does institutional complicity reach? And above all, what leads a man to betray everything he knows, knowing that this betrayal guarantees neither justice nor security? In the judicial archives of Perth, his testimony remains a key piece in open cases. On the streets, his name is already history, but his shadow remains there, reminding us that in the world of organized crime, silence is not loyalty, it is survival, and breaking it an act of courage or madness, or perhaps both at once.